What do you do when the one who taught you what love is also taught you fear, silence, and sacrifice? How do you make peace with the person who shaped your world and also broke parts of you along the way? In the house of my mother, Shari Franke opens a door most of us keep shut, the hidden room in our hearts where our earliest emotional blueprints live. It's a story of home, not the physical kind, but the internal architecture we inherit, question, and one day dare to rebuild. This is a memoir that doesn't whisper. It echoes. Through every page, Franke reminds us that the past is not a sentence. It's scaffolding, and we have every right to remodel the house we were handed. Introduction. Shari Franke's The House of My Mother is not your typical coming-of-age memoir. It's a psychological excavation, part love letter, part lamentation, and part liberation anthem. What makes this memoir stand out isn't just its emotional depth, but its courage. Shari doesn't offer tidy resolutions, nor does she demand pity. Instead, she invites us to sit beside her in the wreckage and watch her sort through the pieces. She gives us permission to examine the stories we've been told, question the love we were raised in, say this doesn't fit me anymore, even when it comes to our own mothers. Through poetic prose and vulnerable reflection, Franke tells the story of her emotional inheritance and how she began to write a new will for herself. 1. Inheritance isn't just DNA, it's emotional blueprints. Most people think of inheritance as money, property, maybe a necklace passed down. But Franke urges us to consider the deeper hand-me-downs, the coping mechanisms, fears, and ways of loving that get silently stitched into our skin. Her mother's house wasn't just built with walls. It was built with rules. Don't cry unless it's quiet. Don't ask questions that make people uncomfortable. Don't make yourself too visible. In vivid scenes, Franke recalls moments from childhood where joy had to be dimmed, anger had to be swallowed, and confusion was met with silence. She speaks of learning to read her mother's face like a weather map, always scanning for emotional storms. We all carry these floor plans into adulthood, and unless we examine them, we risk building houses that feel familiar but never feel like home. Reflection. What have you inherited that isn't yours to carry? Whose voice lives in your head when you tell yourself to shrink? 2. The good daughter is a role, not a life. Shari's reflections on being the good daughter cut deep. It's a role she didn't audition for, but performed with expert precision. She was empathetic, helpful, invisible when needed, praised for being so mature, so easy. But behind that praise was a heavy price. She didn't know how to ask for help. She confused people-pleasing with love. She wore burnout like a badge of honor. In her mother's house, care flowed outward but rarely returned inward. Shari became fluent in others' emotions but illiterate in her own needs. And isn't that the story for so many daughters? The performance of strength so perfect, no one sees the exhaustion behind it. The lesson, being good doesn't mean being whole. And love isn't measured by how much of yourself you erase. 3. Mourning the mother you needed while loving the one you had. One of the most achingly beautiful chapters deals with a grief that society rarely names: ambiguous grief. It's the sorrow of wanting a parent who couldn't show up the way you needed, but who you still love fiercely. Franke writes of standing in her childhood bedroom, realizing that the mother she longed for was never coming. Not because her mother didn't love her, but because she never learned how to offer the love Shari needed. This isn't a story of blame. It's a story of heartbreak. She captures what many of us feel. I grieve not her absence, but her emotional distance. I grieve the conversations we never had, the hugs that felt like quick exchanges rather than anchors. Healing begins with honesty. It's okay to love someone and still mourn the version of them you never got to meet. It doesn't make your love less real. It makes it honest. For breaking the cycle feels like betrayal before it feels like freedom. If you've ever tried to set a boundary in a family that doesn't believe in them, you know this. Healing often feels like harm. Shari talks candidly about setting boundaries that made her feel like a villain, choosing therapy when her family believed in prayer and silence, becoming different, and facing the loneliness of being first. Breaking generational patterns is not a sunrise, it's a storm. And Shari walks us through the turbulence with raw vulnerability. She doesn't glamorize the process. She tells the truth, that healing sometimes means sitting in rooms alone, wondering if you've gone too far, while knowing deep down you're finally coming home to yourself. The reminder, cycles don't break quietly, but they do break with courage, consistency, and compassion. 5. Liberation isn't leaving people behind. It's releasing what keeps you small. Can you love your mother and still walk away from her rules? Can you rewrite your story without erasing your past? Franke's answer is yes, but it requires radical compassion. She writes, I didn't leave her behind. I left behind the parts of me that thought I couldn't exist without her approval. There's an immense power in this shift. It's not rebellion. It's rebirth. By holding her mother's pain in one hand and her own healing in the other, Shari models a new way to love, one where you don't have to disappear to belong. The truth. Liberation isn't rejection, it's expansion. It's saying, I am more than what you taught me, and I still carry you in my heart. 6. Rebuilding a new house, brick by brave brick. The final chapters feel like a warm sunrise after a long winter. Shari doesn't pretend she's done healing. She acknowledges that the work is ongoing, but she's finally building her own house, with windows that let light in, not just keep storms out, with doors that open to conversation instead of closing on silence, with walls that hold her truth, not just her loyalty. She invites us to imagine our own houses. What do we want to keep? What do we want to demolish? What kind of shelter do we want to become for ourselves and for others? Her message is simple, stunning, and sacred. I don't need to live in my mother's house to honor her story. I need to live in a house where I can breathe. The invitation, tear down gently. Rebuild with love. Make it yours. Conclusion. The House of My Mother is not just a memoir. It's a mirror held up to anyone raised inside emotional architecture that never truly fit. It's a permission slip for every daughter, son, or child who has felt both love and longing in the same breath. For those who have craved more and felt guilty for it, Shari Franke doesn't offer closure. She offers courage, the courage to feel fully, love deeply, and live authentically. You don't have to be who your parents were. You don't have to carry what they didn't know how to put down. You don't have to live in a house built for someone else's survival. You can choose to build one made for your joy. What kind of emotional house are you living in today? Is it safe? Is it yours? Share in the comments. Your story may give someone else the blueprint they've been searching for. Want to feel every page of this memoir? Listen to the full audiobook of The House of My Mother. You'll hear pain, yes, but also power, poetry, and possibility. Subscribe to AudioBookCAPS for more transformative summaries like this one. Because every story you hear has the power to reshape the story you live. And remember, you are not the house you were born into. You are the architect of the home you choose to build.